Good morning. This is a Saturday Morning Mastermind, and this is Catherine Clement in Boulder, Colorado, here with my friend Dan. I'll let him introduce himself in just a second. We are a group of friends that get together every Saturday morning, and we study different books, usually like self-development type books. And right now we're talking and studying about the 5 love languages, and there's a lot of different versions of this book. We're studying the singles edition, but it pertains to, I think, all of the books, even though they kind of have a theme. They pertain to a lot of different areas in your life. So we're on chapter 12, which is talking about the relationships that these 5 love languages aren't just about romantic relationships. They're also about other relationships, like your coworkers and your classmates and the people that just other people that you come into contact with on a daily basis. So I'll let Dan come in and introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Just the happenings of life, but we're glad you're here and look forward to going over this chapter and seeing what it has to say and for whatever comes next.
Awesome. You were kind of frozen up at the beginning of that, but it might have just been on my end. I'm not sure. Things seem a little bit glitchy this morning. So basically this chapter, it covers, a few different situations, but it's basically talking about like roommates, classmates, and coworkers. That's sort of what it's focusing on. And it starts out talking about, I had to laugh the way it started out because it talks about this guy whose thought of living in a college dorm is just, terrifying to him, because in his case, he's really tidy, and, his worst nightmare was to get some kind of party animal roommate, which is exactly what happened. So I thought that's pretty funny, because I can't imagine. I think that all the time as I pick up these kids I'm an Uber driver, and as I pick up kids, the college kids, take them to and from classes and stuff, and I hear some of the stories about, the parties going on until 4 a.m. and different things like that, and I think, oh my God, I couldn't survive in a college dorm. When I went to college, I was already married and had kids, and I had my own nightmare to live through as far as trying to work and take care of the family and do college. But I have a hard time. I live in a house with other people, and they're primarily quiet people, and they're amazingly wonderful people. But I still have trouble living with other people for various reasons, because I sleep at weird times, and I'm a super light sleeper. And I mean, I can lay inside and hear the trees outside. It's just horrible. And so this college dorm thing, that would be my nightmare too. So I totally relate to this dude. But anyway, he has this party animal roommate who, leaves his socks on his desk chair, this guy's desk chair, or, the dude's desk is so messy he doesn't even have room to put his books on his desk, so he puts them on this other dude's desk, and he leaves his shoes in the middle of the room where the guy trips over him and stuff. So he's kind of at his wit's end, and he happens to run into the author of the book, and they're friends, and the author asked him, how's college? And like, well, it's driving me crazy. My roommate's driving me crazy. And so he kind of told him what was going on. And basically what he told him is that, if someone in your life is doing something that annoys you and you're going to ask them to change it, um, it will go a lot better and a lot smoother and a lot more productively if that person feels like you genuinely care about them and love them. And so he asked him, what is your roommate's primary love language? Because the theory of this book is that there's basically five primary love languages, and everybody, or five love languages, and everybody has like a primary. They have one that's most important and then secondary, and we all receive love through all of them, but one or two are more important to us. So he asked him what his primary love language is, and they figured out it was words of affirmation. And so what he told him to do is, like, every day for 3 weeks to tend to that love language. In other words, say something positive to him or give him an affirming uh, statement, at least once a day for 3 weeks. And then after that, when his quote love tank, they talk about having your love tank full, when his love tank was all filled up from those 3 weeks of positive words of affirmation, then he could ask him to change one thing. So he had him write down all the things he wanted him to change, and he wanted him to figure out which one was the most important, because he was just going to ask him one thing. And long story short, the guy did it, and these guys became really great roommates, and the guy started picking up after himself, and they really started developing a strong personal relationship. So, Dan, what did you think about that situation? You have roommates as well, I believe.
I actually do. I have one roommate that's been on and off a roommate over the last, about 13 years or so. Uh, and he and I, you know, developed a great friendship. But in living as roommates, I'll be honest, I'm not the total like disregard messy type, but I am not the everything has to be neat and perfect and in place and intact. He is a lot more. Uh, he's not anally to the far end of that spectrum, but he is a lot more cleaner and stuff and things like that. And and I'm more of a I like having people around, like with my family and stuff. I like hanging out, just hanging out, talking stuff. And he can have moments where, if like he's off in his room or something, I might come by and say, "Oh, what's up?" or however or whatever. And he tends to get annoyed at little things like that every now and then. And so I'm having to learn, even after 13 some odd years of friendship, still kind of learning and, traversing, you know, what works and what doesn't work. And it's hard because some people don't really let on to what works for them. They are just so very, except with certain people. And so sometimes it takes a little more time and deduction and looking and analyzing at things. I'm finally starting to figure some things out. And he actually, I think, understands me a little better because we've even talked a little bit, not like on the five love languages, but just in general how we both are. And that's helped. But yeah, it's interesting that they would talk about this type of scenario because in some ways I've lived it, and it can really, cause, I don't want to say distress, but it can cause, that friction that really doesn't need to be there if you just pay attention and kind of look and, you know, put, you know, learn how the other person is, and you can then employ that. And it does make a big difference because I have seen some changes and difference even in me, because I've even made some changes in myself that I felt I needed to make in order to make things better too, because sometimes it's not always about making the other person change. It's about you looking at yourself too and making yourself change too.
I think it has to start with us, definitely, because you just can't. Well, it's funny. I live in Boulder, Colorado. It seems like people here just want everything in their life absolutely perfect, and everybody else better make it that way. But you can't, especially in a housemate situation, you can't just expect the other people to make everything perfect for you. I mean, like, everybody has their own rights to whatever, and everybody has. I mean, if one person lives in the house and pays rent, and another person lives in the house and pays rent, then everybody should get, you know, there's compromises that have to be made, but nobody's needs should be put above another person's needs, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we all have different time schedules. One of the things that I did recently, I've I work a lot of hours and I don't sleep very well, and so I just found myself getting more and more and more and more exhausted. And so it seemed like the tireder I got, the more hypersensitive to sound I got. And so what I had to do was buy these, they're kind of like headphones, but it's more like a headband, and the speakers are flat so that you can sleep in them. And I started, you know, playing noise basically that drowns out the other noise so that I can get some rest. And I think I definitely am not caught up yet, but I'm, at least beginning to see a light at the end of the tunnel, starting to feel like my sleep meter is getting filled up slightly at this point. And I think if I can continue on this trajectory, maybe I'll get caught up here in another year or so, as depleted as I feel. But I think you're right. You have to start with you first. Like, I can't just demand that everybody is silent at all the hours that I need people to be silent. So I was like, okay, what can I do here? I've got to get sleep. And I didn't think I could really sleep to noise, but it turns out I can, as long as it's like this, just a constant noise, I can kind of sleep to that and get some rest, and it drowns out the other stuff. But it's interesting how different we all are, and yet, we're all the same as far as we all want to feel loved, and none of us want to feel like a burden, and none of us want to intentionally upset our housemates or anything like that. But it's just because people are different, certain issues come up. And I thought it was brilliant. I mean, it sounds so simple, but I just thought his suggestion, the author's suggestion, was brilliant when he said, if you're going to ask somebody to change something, make sure that they feel loved by you. So show them that you love them first. And he points out it's not about manipulation. It's about teaching people how to love each other, because nobody really teaches us how to love each other. As I read, there's several parts in this chapter, and as I read some of them, sometimes I just shake my head because I think, why do we have to do all this stuff? Love is a lot of work, and to me, like, if somebody just suddenly started telling me, like, mine isn't words of affirmation, but if it was, and somebody just suddenly started, okay, so mine's acts of service. So if somebody just started doing something for me every day for 3 weeks, I'd be really suspicious as hell. Like, what's going on? I would think, okay, they want something, So it's interesting how, this in this particular instance, this person was very uh, receptive, to that tactic, and it just reminds me how different I am sometimes. But the another situation that they brought up was like this coworker situation, and that one was, again, I thought quite humorous, because the girl's major complaint about the other girl was that, she didn't feel like she was doing enough. And then as they tried to figure out love languages, it turns out that the girl feels so unappreciated. Like, she just feels like everybody's always criticizing her and never telling her that she does anything right. And which is exactly what the other girl wanted to do. So I thought that was kind of humorous, but you never know what someone is struggling with. You have no idea. Like, most of us only share, 1 or 2% of our lives with other people. Now, Facebook has changed that a little bit. Some people get on there and share 100% of their life, some stuff that maybe they shouldn't share. But for the for the majority of us, we share a very small portion of our lives. So you never really know what all that person is struggling with. And you don't, before you go to criticizing somebody, you don't know, um, maybe they are doing the very, very best that they can, or maybe they've never been, maybe the things that you're expecting from them, maybe they've never been taught how to do that. Maybe that's never been um, role, something that they've seen done in their lives. And so we have to be more understanding with each other, um, and not try to just conform everybody into little mini me's of ourselves.
Yeah, I was gonna chime in because I understand the second situation where you're feeling. Because a lot of times with everybody I interacted in my life, I feel like I just don't do anything right for anybody and that I do everything wrong. I know part of that's my own thought process of how I look at things, and I'm trying to learn and look at that and change it and put it into perspective. But that goes back from, childhood stuff, things too. So that's, things I'm working with. But at the same point, I also feel like that, because even though I have a roommate and I have friends, but like within my own family and, my good close friends, I feel like I'm always trying to build everybody else up with like words of affirmation and letting them know that, and stuff, which I think is one of my strong, main love languages. But yet I never hear people say that back to me. And I get like, I feel like, ugh, just like, what do I have to do to get a little bit, of somebody seeing the efforts and the things I do? And yeah, and it's weird because going back to what you were saying earlier, I don't want somebody to just do it or just automatically do it or do it because they realize I want it to be genuine and real and come from a place of sincerity, because once again, we all pick up on when it's not real and sincere. So then it gives me that weird cycle, and then I get really frustrated, and that's when I just kind of just, uh, usually that's when I just kind of take a little time away from everybody and just go into my room and just kind of tell the whole world go away. But I don't want to be like that because, that doesn't help the situation either. So I can very well understand that second situation personally, because it's something I go through all the time. And, you know, that's why this book is helping a lot in a lot of these areas, helping me to understand and look at people and try and learn and disseminate what their language is so I can work towards getting my love tank filled, but from a genuine place of where it's coming, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. And I think, having a book about it also helps just because it can become a conversational piece, and you can just say to somebody, we've been reading this book and it's pretty interesting. And, I found out that my primary love language is words of affirmation, and I didn't really realize that. Now I understand why, if people are harsh, it hurts my feelings, or, whatever, it gives something to bring the subject up where you might not have been able to address that subject in another way, so I actually just bought the book for my daughter because she just got married. Now they've been in a relationship for years, but I thought, that'll be a good little starting wedding present there, is just to put these out there. They seem to get along really well, but as we've said over and over, it's not just about the the romantic relationship, but it'll help them with their kids. It'll help them with family. He's got quite a big family, and I know there's been some rubs there, and maybe reading the book will help them figure out some of that stuff and just make for better relations with everybody, coworkers and different things like that. um, I don't necessarily, it's interesting, I guess I've always worked in somewhat of a solitary, uh, I'm just a hermit, and I work, I don't have coworkers. Like right now, I'm an Uber driver, so I don't have coworkers. But even when I was a nurse, I did primary care nursing, and there wasn't a lot of interaction other than, saving babies' lives with the nurse next to me. But there wasn't a lot of personal relationships, friendships with my coworkers. Like um, that hasn't been something that I've done. And as I was reading through the things to ponder at the back of at the end of the chapter, it gives you like 5 things to think about, and it talks about, think about your high school classmates, friendships, and what are their love languages, and how can you promote that? I don't have any of those relationships. Then it asks about college. I don't have any of those relationships. It's like, holy smokes, I don't have relationships with anybody. So, but, driving college kids around, I see like they're in fraternities and things, and they have a lot of relationships. So, I think that maybe we should just give this book to put it in, like, I don't know if first grades are quite appropriate, but put it in the elementary schools or something, to start people off.
That's interesting that you say that, because it's funny how we go to school to supposedly learn things that we need to learn and help prepare us for life alongside what our parents theoretically are supposed to teach us and stuff. And yet, how, when we get out there in life, at how a lot of times inept we are at finagling the rivers of life that we go through and the different, streams and tributaries and paths we take as we wander, on our journey through life, that, you know, we do have these, rocks and things that are in the way of the stream and get in the way, and how we have to work around and through, because we've talked about in other books, about how, being we can, water still is a powerful force. It just learns how to go over, under, around, or whatever. And I think that's, part of what our lives are kind of like rivers, where we get the things that come up and we have to learn and grow and deal with them, to deal with what, but it would be nice to be a little more, you know, able to deal with those things and not have to go through the headache sometimes of having to go through hurt relationships or lost friendships or this and that. Yes, I'm sure that's part of why we go through these things, but sometimes, you know, really good friendships have been lost because of little things that we didn't understand about each other and may well have been able to avoid by having books and stuff like this to better understand how to navigate. And it's just interesting how, as being a part of this group and going on this journey, how much it's helped me to look at myself and learn a lot about myself too, and to realize that I have so much more to learn, grow, change, find out about myself still too, as well as how to interact and deal with other people.
Yeah, I don't think school really teaches us much about like not much helpful. I mean, obviously we have to know how to read and do math and things like that, but mostly what I think school teaches us is like how to be quiet and follow the rules and conform, and um, that it needs to teach like, well, back when we were in school, Dan, at least there was like home ec and stuff. They don't even have that anymore. I mean, at least they used to teach you how to cook and sew and do some useful things. But
Auto
um,
shop, woodworking.
yeah, yeah, they taught some practical stuff, but I don't even think they do any of that these days. And um, so you get out of school and you still can't care for yourself if your mom or dad hasn't taught you how to do it. And unfortunately, and especially in these days and times, moms and dads are so busy, like they don't have time to teach their kids anything. So it'll be interesting to see future generations, things circle around. So maybe we'll come back to some more practicality at some point. I think that schools are just going to wind up being online. I mean, we can't seem to raise enough funds to keep the teachers paid and the buildings in good repair anyway. So I think eventually it'll all be just done online where the information's readily available instead of using 20-year-old books in schools like some of them are. Um, but I think it would be great actually for them to bring in some of these self-development ideas. I mean, obviously some of the books that we've read are above grade school level, but there are children's versions. Like some of you may have heard me mention Byron Katie before. She has a children's book called Tiger, Tiger, Is It True? And there's a lot of these self-development authors who have made children's versions of these books. Now, I haven't looked to see if this particular author has, but it would kind of surprise me if he hasn't.
He
Like,
does. He does have for uh, children or either children or teenagers, one or the other. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I went through and looked through at the different versions, and there is one for the younger audience.
yeah, that's great. Because some of these concepts would be really helpful to learn like before you're in your mid 50s. By that time, you've already screwed up a lot of stuff, So I think that getting some of these concepts in earlier would be very helpful. And maybe, in the junior high school, maybe that'd be a place to start addressing some of this human relations, have a human relations class. Maybe that would help uh, decrease the amount of violence in schools, because people get violent when they get scared, when they feel like they're not being heard, when they feel like nobody understands them. So bringing in some of these concepts instead of just banning guns. I know everybody wants guns banned, but I as far as I can see throughout history, the bad guys have always had guns. And they will always have guns. So I don't see how taking the guns away from the good guys is going to help that situation. But, and forgive me if you're someone who is a victim of gun violence, because it's not that I don't understand that aspect of it, I do, but I just am not sure that taking, lawful citizens protection away from them is the answer, because I do believe the bad guys always get them one way or another. Um, but I do believe absolutely that teaching people how to understand one another and how to work through challenges and work through arguments using words, um, instead of guns, I think that has a chance at helping. And but it's so, to me, it's so hypocritical, because we talk about taking away guns, but at the same time, as a country, when we don't get along with another country, we just go blow them up and shoot them up. So it's, to me, it's like so very hypocritical. Um, but we need to teach people how to work issues out without violence. Now, back when I was in grade school, everybody carried a knife. Like, it wasn't a gun, but it was a knife, and people didn't necessarily use them on each other, but they had them. And there was a lot of fist fighting when I was in school. We had a lot of fights. Like, there was, you could be best friends in the morning, be, enemies at lunch, have a fist fight out on the playground, and be best friends by afternoon already. Like, it was that quick. But now, I guess, in trying to control violence, you can't, fist fights aren't allowed anymore. You can't have a fight anymore. And it seems to me like when they started not letting kids work it out on their own, that's when the guns started coming in, and the violence actually escalated instead of the other way around. I could be totally wrong on that, but that's kind of how it appeared to me. Like, we used to just work it out on our own. But people just, we don't know what they're witnessing in their homes. Dan, you and I, we both experienced violence in our homes and stuff, and abuse and things, and you just don't know what somebody's living with and what behaviors have been modeled to them on how to resolve a situation. If the only way they've ever seen a situation resolved is to beat the living crap out of the other person or to shoot them or something, then that's all they've ever seen. I mean, we see that in other cultures a lot, where there's different ways of um, dealing with situations, and it may seem very foreign to us, but that may be the only way that they've ever known, you know. And so as we try to live together on this little round planet of ours, I mean, I think a lot of us have realized that the big bombs, you can't just bomb one side of the world, you bomb the whole world when you put off a bomb. And so we've got to learn how to talk and how to figure things out. And I wonder how much Trump and the politicians are working on figuring out the other country's primary love language there, Dan.
I was just gonna say, yeah, if if instead of looking for that type of solution, look for ways of how to understand where the other person's coming from and what it is they need to help them feel like they're secure. But that you words a common and make work for both sides, but nobody wants to really come to the table without all these demands and all these things and all this stuff, instead of coming to the table first and saying, okay, what are you looking for? Just list it out, tell us, and whatever. And
You were kind of breaking up there. You were kind of frozen. If you could just
I
repeat.
think it's the internet connection I'm on. I'm dog sitting and house sitting at my friend's house, and I don't know what's going on with their internet. I've never had problems before, but oh well. I'm doing the best I can with it. So,
I
um,
can hear you now.
but I think, it goes back to where if we could give them this book and say, don't talk to each other until you fully read this book, come together, you know, let each side bring what their, I don't want to say demands, but what their items that they need to make their own countries feel secure and what they're looking for, and then work on ways of how they can fit that in better ways, but yet each side comes in with, like they have to be the one that comes out on top, instead of learning to look at it as both sides coming out winning if they can compromise. You know, goes back to what the basis of this book, learning to understand the other person and what makes them feel loved and secure and, important. You know, so
Kind of froze up there at the end again. But I got the gist of what you were saying, and yeah, I wonder what it would be like if, like, United Nations read this book together or something. um, where it's voting time, and every intersection that I drive through these days, there's somebody standing there with a sign, vote yes on this, and on the other side of the street, vote no on that. They're all like at odds, and it's I don't know what to vote for. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to vote, because I don't know that I know what to vote for, and I don't want to vote for the wrong thing. Half the time, I don't feel like my vote makes any difference at all, because like, we voted against fracking here where I live, and then they went behind our backs and changed it and started doing it anyway. So, it's hard to say whether it helps. And yet I think about all the people who sacrificed their lives for voting rights, and I feel like it's something that you have to do, um, because so many died just so that we could have the right to express our opinions on things. And that it seems like a very corrupt system. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see the government working on some of this stuff. And because, I mean, it's a round planet, we have to find a way to make peace, or we're just gonna, I guess we always have been at war, but I hate to think of always being at war. I wish that we could figure out a way to get along with each other. And I don't have anything against the military. They're simply serving our country and keeping us safe and protecting us and stuff, but I just wish there was no need for it. I wish that, countries could come to some agreements where war isn't required. And I wish that I wish that the wealth was distributed, um, in a healthier way, because I totally, there's just no doubt about it that poverty causes people to act out in ways that they would not act out if, they're, think of yourself being a mother or a father and your children haven't eaten in 3 days. You're going to do whatever it takes. like the laws and the rules just go off the books at that point. You're just going to work from a base of survival, and you're going to do whatever it takes to get food in those bellies. And if that means stealing that food from somebody else, maybe that's what that means. And so I think if wealth were better distributed somehow, and people weren't forced into this fight or flight survival mode, that just in itself would de-escalate the violence quite a bit. It also leads to poverty, also leads to just, a feeling of despair and a lack of hope. And when you don't have any hope for your future, that makes it a lot easier to pick up a gun and walk into a building and blow a lot of people away and then kill yourself, because you had no hope for tomorrow anyway. So as hard as it is to figure out these negotiations, we just we have to find a way to do it. We have to, and I think it's a joke in a way. I mean, it's not a joke at all, but in a way, it's funny to me because I want to see peace in the world, and yet, I haven't even found it within myself a lot of times. I mean, I can get so overly tired that I'm like Godzilla or somebody, like I can just turn into the most hateful person you've ever seen, because I can't function from lack of sleep. And so if I can't even, find peace within myself or find peace within my relationships, then how do I expect the world to find peace? So that's why, back to what we were talking about earlier, it has to start with us. Everything has to start with us, including peace. We have to find that peace within ourselves, and we have to figure out how to stop warring with ourselves. Because most of us are our own worst enemy. You know, we're the ones that have that little angel devil voice going on in our head, like a Flintstone sitting on your shoulder. We're the ones that berate ourselves the most. I mean, if other people were as cruel to us as we are to ourselves, we would never tolerate it. But some of the things that we say to ourselves, I just tell myself to shut up. Like, I'm pretty good at catching myself now. I'll listen to what I say to myself, and I'm like, that was very unkind, You shouldn't say that. And I think when we can learn to be kinder and more gentle and understanding with ourselves, then we can spread that out to other people. But as long as we're at war within ourselves, I think it's going to be hard to find good relationships with others.
I think you kind of hit part of the nail on the head, though, where, it's a lot of times what's going on in our own head and what we say to ourselves, and consequently, we went over a book. What do you say when you talk to yourself? Because we all do it. None of us like to admit that we do it, but we do it. Sometimes we do it on a constant basis. Uh, you know, uh, but if you can learn, like you said, get better at listening to yourself and what you say to yourself, that might also help in how you say things to other people then too, in conjunction with like this book, how you stop. And because even now I kind of will now stop myself, and I'll just pause for a minute when I've got something I really want to say or something I'm wanting to try and get across, but I want to get it in a good way, or a good tone, or make sure I'm saying it, you know, without judgment or whatever. because of this book and then some other books we've done, I am trying to get better at stopping myself and saying, stop, get those thoughts out of my head. Don't think about that. Change my thought, look at it from a different perspective. Or I try to think of something else for a little bit and then come back to it and look at it again. But that's easier said than done. And with everyday life, and like you said, if I get tired or frustrated or somebody else frustrates me, a lot of that goes out the window.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's easy when life is going easy and things are good. Like it's easy to use all these different techniques, and but when the shit hits the fan, so to speak, and it seems like everything is crumbling down on you, you know, they say that's when you can really tell a person's true character is when everything's going bad. How do they act? But I don't know how fair that is, honestly. I mean, I just, because sometimes, you know, whether it's uh, sleep deprivation or, you know, starvation or whatever it is that's motivating that ugly behavior, I think under quote, you know, normal or semi-normal circumstances, those people would never act that way, you know. So I don't think that that's really a true judge of character. I mean, I kind of get where they're coming from, but um, at the same time, even just having low blood sugar can affect somebody's behavior so much. I mean, literally, it can, just having a low blood sugar can make somebody act out in ways that they would never act out otherwise. And and it's not their fault, you know, it's body chemistry. And I think that, you know, the our human bodies are freaking amazing, okay? But they're so complicated, you guys. Like there's so many hormones and so many bioelectrical connections going on and off, and even just, you know, skipping breakfast or whatever, it can really set off this cascade of events in your body. And I'm not saying to use that as an excuse to treat people like shit, but I'm just saying I don't think you can necessarily judge a person's true character sometimes by the way they're acting in a certain situation, because we don't know what's behind that. And whether it's, you know, poor environment or whatever issues they're dealing with, we we just need to be more tolerant, I think. Um, Another piece of this book, um, it was talking about these girls who were friends, and they were like friends through high school, and they were both dating people, and then one of the girls' boyfriends got killed in a alcohol related accident, and how they were supportive of one another. Like the one girl was supportive of the girl whose girlfriend died, and it just so happened she was conveying her primary love languages, which was, I think, quality time and touch or something. So she felt really good about, you know, being able to spend time and help her talk through the grief. It said that like all summer, that's all they did was hang out. She let the girl talk about the good times with her boyfriend and helped her work through that grief. And then later on down the line, that the girl who was being so supportive, she wound up needing support. And then the tables kind of turned, you know, and the other girl was able to support her. And I think that's more the scenario we need to go for is, you know, instead of just expecting everything to be perfect all the time, is just realizing that life is hard, you know, and people are going to need our help and support, and you're going to give it sometimes, and then maybe later you're going to get it. And like you were saying, Dan, for some of us, it feels like we're always the one who's supportive, or we're always the one who's doing, for me, it's acts of service. So I'm always feeling like, why am I always the one doing the acts of service, but nobody's doing any acts of service for me, And like you were saying, that's how you feel with your primary love language. Why are you the one always being encouraging with words and yet nobody's encouraging to you? And I don't know why that is. Like, I don't know why it feels that way. I don't know if we're just more sensitive or tuned into it, or, I think people are just doing the best they can. I think it's a crazy, hectic world. It's changed so much since I was a kid, where you know, you had a phone on the wall. It never, ever rang after 9 o'clock at night. I mean, it was back in those times, it was so rude to call anybody after 9 o'clock at night, or you didn't ever go to anybody's house after the sun went down. Like as a kid, you didn't go to a friend's house after sun went down. There were some pretty uh, strict rules back then about letting people have, quote, quiet time. And if you think about it now, like, there's no quiet time anymore. All of us are connected to the internet. Many of us have international friends, and it's like a constant bombardment, even if you have your notifications turned off. And even, I mean, like, I'm afraid to turn my phone off at night, because what if my kids needed me, or my mom, or, family emergency or something. But I have settings on there to where it's only going to wake me up for certain people. and and I hate to do that, but like, you have to be able to get some rest. There has to be some downtime. And I find it a daunting task, really, because I know that even with the notifications off, I'm going to wake up the next morning and there's going to be, so many number of people waiting to hear a response from me. And I have just sort of checked out of Facebook lately because I've been so exhausted. I just don't have the wherewithal to get on there and keep up with everything and everybody and answer everybody. And when you think about, as a kid, you might have had a few friends, but now you've got like 5,000 friends on Facebook. It's really hard to nurture. It's impossible to nurture all of those relationships. I mean, you can pick some and try to nurture those, but even then, everybody's life is so inundated. It's so busy. And just to get, 5 minutes of peace is such a treasure these days. And of course, Dan does some Uber driving as well. And so we hear people in our back seats, we hear how hectic their lives are and how they're trying to keep up with everything. And so in a way, it's been kind of helpful to me, because for one thing, I think, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one feeling so overwhelmed, for one thing. And then secondly, it gives some perspective, because sometimes people are dealing with a lot worse things than you are, or sometimes they're getting pretty wired over stuff that you think, oh my God, at least I'm not upset over that. Because, it's so, I think talking to other people, there used to be a lot more community in our communities, in our lives. Um, the women got together and talked, and the men got together and talked, and I guess they still do, in ways, but not like it used to be. And so I think people lose perspective fairly easily, and they feel like they're the only one feeling that way. They're the only one feeling so overwhelmed. They're the only one who, does everything for everybody else and nobody does anything for them. And those sorts of feelings um, are very misplaced. We're never the only one. And So I think doing book studies like this, getting on here and talking, um, and even if you only have one friend that you can talk to, just not keeping it all bottled up. You'd be amazed how much just having a little conversation with somebody can ease the tension when you realize you're not the only one, or that someone cares, or that someone understands. It can really just um, take such a weight off of your shoulders. And but when we try to just keep it all bottled up, like I do howl therapy, which sounds ridiculous, but I'll just start howling. I'll howl, sometimes happy howl, sometimes sad howl, sometimes mad howl, but it just helps me vocalize without having to put it all into words, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I've had a few times where I've just like when nobody's been home or nobody's been around, I've just not necessarily howled. I've just screamed and just because sometimes words just don't do enough sometimes, and just doing a scream or like for you like the howl or something, it just I don't want to say just that out of you and get and let you exhale it and express it, and you're not doing it towards anybody, so then that way nobody gets any hurt feelings or anything, or they understand what you're doing or whatever. And then I find that after I've done little things like that, and then talking to that one or two close friends where I can voice then what I'm saying, does a lot for me. It usually gets a lot of what is going on in my head out of my head, and spoken, I guess, in a way, release it and get it from that point on the other side, and then take what I get from my friends and stuff, then find, and usually it gets put back into perspective where I can work with it and deal with it and move on.
Yeah, we're kind of like volcanoes. I mean, volcanoes have these little mini eruptions, and then once in a while they have like this big eruption. But if they didn't have any eruptions, it would be a huge explosion, right? And I think we have to like let off steam a little bit here and there. And for me, like you just said, I prefer to do it by myself so that no one else is suffering from that, because most of it's made up in our heads anyway, right? Most of the stuff that we're upset about is just crazy stuff we make up in our heads anyway. So I always feel like no one else should have to suffer from that. um, I don't particularly find cussing um, like a wonderful attribute to have. However, and I never used to cuss, but now I cuss a lot, and I'm okay with cussing, because I mean, I don't like cuss people out, but I'll cuss to myself because it helps me. It's like that mini eruption, it just helps me get it out a little bit. And it's all energy. All that stuff is energy. And if you just bottle it up, it's going to be way worse than just cussing in the moment and then moving on. Like, you'd be amazed. Sometimes I'll get frustrated over something and I can just, have a 30-second tirade about it, and then I'm over it, and then it's done and it's not messing with me anymore. And to me, that's better than being quote proper or whatever and not cussing. It's you know, um, I think it's great. People that go through their lives that don't cuss, that's awesome. But for me, I just feel like my head's going to explode if I don't do something. So, of course, breathing is good. Breathing is very good. I do a lot of breathing techniques and things like that too. But, everybody needs a release. And I think that's why there's a lot of people who are kind of like fanatical with their workouts, because that's how they express that energy, is through working out. And but other people, it's other things. They become workaholics or they become abusive because they don't know what to do with that energy. Um, and unfortunately, that does hurt other people. But it is a sense of relief for them in a way. So that's a whole nother topic there. Um,
Well, I was going to kind of bring what you were saying kind of back in line with this book, because I think a lot of, and I think this encompasses a lot of the books we have covered, because we've covered a lot of books that deal with how we look at things, how we perceive things, how we say things in our head and stuff. And this is another book of a tool to use for us to understand other people, get reactions we want. But I think that in going through this process and journey of being a part of this group, what I'm learning is there are a lot of tools if we learn to repertoire of things to use as ways of how to handle things, and so therefore certain things work in certain instances, but to the key goal is getting back to that peace and harmony of where we're interacting with each other with the best intentions and trying to draw out the best intentions with other people, so that way, you know, we can get more things done and accomplished and achieved, and we as the other person, but we understand where it's going and what is needed to be done in order to facilitate those things. And I think it's interesting that, this book is another tool and something else I can use to help me better understand other people, understand how to put things forth to them, and to help draw them out to respond back to me in the way I need. And it's interesting how, over time I've employed something out of, I think, all of the books that we've, taken, because certain things stick out and it's like, oh, okay, that can work for me, or this can work for me, or I can like this. And it's just, once again, another aspect of that growth and my growth to get me to where I ultimately would like to be, and how I treat other people and respond to other people, and to get them to respond back to me.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're all building our toolboxes. Mine gets fuller every day, different things, and different things work for different situations. Well, it's at the top of the hour, and we invite you to come be with us live on this any Saturday morning. You're welcome, and join our Facebook group, Mindset Mastery Collective. Check out our YouTube channel, Mindset Mastery Collective, and Saturday Morning Mastermind.com. We got all kinds of different resources going on. We are almost at the end of this book. I think we have 2 more chapters, 2 or 3 maybe, or 2 chapters and an aftermath or whatever they call it. But so we'll only be a couple more weeks on this book. So we do need to start thinking about what our next book is going to be. We normally take about 2 weeks off between books to let everybody, give them a chance to buy the book and stuff. And what we normally do is on our Facebook group, we'll put a post up and we'll let people suggest books. And then we kind of have a book list and we vote on what's going to be our next book. So we encourage everybody to participate in that. Maybe this book isn't your cup of tea, but you have another one that you think would be helpful to the group. So please jump on there and make that suggestion, and help us get a good, interesting conversation going for the next one. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, Dan, for being here with me. And we have a lot of members that are just busy. Samantha's moving, and Sandy was busy with a client this morning and stuff. So hopefully we'll get some more of our members coming back in the next couple of weeks as we finish up this book. And hope everybody has an awesome week. We'll see you next Saturday. Take care.